Welcome to Perspectives in Business. I am Juan Carlos Giraldo from Boston, United States. Palm oil is used in almost everything in our homes, such as frying oil, margarine, butter, cookies, snacks, ice cream, soap, etc. According to PricewaterhouseCoopers, the palm oil industry is a strategic product that contributes to the economic and social growth of society. However, companies have a lot of work to do in the relationship with biodiversity and palm oil, as clearing land for plantation is a major driver of deforestation. Today, in this episode, my guest is Michelle Desilets. Michelle is the executive director of the Orangutan Land Trust, which aims to find sustainable solutions for the long-term survival of the orangutan in the wild and raise consumer awareness to demand sustainable palm oil. And with Michelle, we discuss biodiversity, corporations, sustainability, and of course, palm oil. Hello, Michelle. How are you? It's a pleasure to have you today in my podcast. How is everything?
I'm great. I'm really excited to be here and be able to talk to you about the things that matter to me.
Thank you, Michelle. Today, we will discuss a topic involving one of the essential commodities, which is the palm oil. And as we know, palm oil is used in almost everything in our homes, from margarine, butter, and, dressing, snacks, etc. So the palm oil industry contribute to the society economy, but have a lot of challenge in the same time. So I would like to start this conversation to get into the topic first. Would you mind to define what palm oil is and why it is an essential commodity?
Okay, I'll try. So, palm oil is a vegetable oil. It is derived from the flesh of the fruit of a specific variety of palm tree that originated in West Africa and has since been cultivated all across the world in the tropical regions of Latin America, Asia, and Africa, particularly in Southeast Asia and places like Indonesia and Malaysia, which are the largest growers and producers of palm oil. You can also get palm kernel oil out of the kernel of the fruit, and that is used in other applications. And the palm oil can be fractionated into a multitude, hundreds of different derivatives, and each of those have their own chemical profiles and uses, benefits, attributes, these kinds of things, making it widespread in industrial applications and oleochemical and personal care goods, home care goods, these kinds of things. It is, as you said, it's the most widely consumed vegetable oil on the planet, miles ahead of its competitors such as sunflower or rapeseed oil. And this is due in part to the fact that it's very versatile. It can be used in all of these different things, especially when you fractionate it. It's also available year round and can be harvested year round. And the crop's productivity, so once you plant the oil palm, within about 4 to 5 years, you start getting enough product to sell. And then the viability of that crop will last 25, maybe even 30 years. And then you can do another cycle. If you've done best practice, you won't have depleted the soil so much that you can't plant again in the same area. It's also very cheap by virtue of all of these things. It extends shelf life, so that makes it very popular. It has it's a flavor profile. Basically, it has very little flavor or smell. So that means when you add it to foods, it doesn't, interfere with the flavor profile of the food that you're trying to.
Palm oil is always in the news because its environmental and biodiversity impact. What is the environmental impact of palm oil in biodiversity?
Well, traditionally, it's been catastrophic, is the only word for it, because as palm oil is spread, the cultivation of oil palm is spread, and as we said, it grows predominantly in the tropical areas, which happen to be the most biodiverse areas and happen to be usually the most forested areas of the planet. Traditionally, to grow oil palm, a grower would clear fell a forest, and that would reduce the biodiversity of mammals and bird species, reptile species, 80 to 100% depletion of the resident species
Right.
in these areas. Additional impacts of the water, the pollution and the runoff of effluent at mills and greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, depleting that carbon store. And the some of the key species that have caught the attention for the past couple of decades of the discussion on palm oils, these beautiful iconic species like the orangutan, the tiger, the elephant, and as big species roaming large areas and their habitat being destroyed, yes, they suffered enormously. There's no denying the significant impacts that conventionally produced palm oil can have on biodiversity and the planet at large.
Yes, no, no, certainly the impact is enormous. Speaking about non-profit organization that you are in, you lead one very important and is related to palm oil. For example, many authors, experts like yourself, when I took courses in different universities here in United States, sustainability is related to biodiversity and also is very important the critical role of NGOs, how these non-profit organizations work very closely and collaborate instead, compete with the corporate. How important is that non-profit organizations and companies collaborate to reduce the impact, for example, in this case, of palm oil production, in your opinion?
In the case of palm oil, especially, really the NGOs spearheaded the efforts to change the way that this industry worked. And they helped to define what a sustainable palm oil industry should look like, how they would demonstrate compliance with what would become voluntary principles and criteria as per under the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, against which a grower can be audited to demonstrate compliance and deliver really tangible benefits, outcomes as a result. So in the early days, 20 odd years or more ago when I started, it was like, we've got to fight the industry. We got to shut it down. Let's boycott palm oil. It soon became clear that that was no solution. It didn't matter how many NGOs there were. This is a global commodity and it's being consumed globally. And we need to understand how to accommodate such commodities in a way that minimizes the impact of biodiversity. So that's when we started sitting down with other NGOs, with governments, with the growers themselves, with financial institutions that are lending to these growers, with the manufacturers and retailers that are buying the product and putting it into our favorite chocolates or shampoos here in the West or anywhere in the world for that matter, and understanding that there is a shared responsibility to come to the solutions. You can't fight these issues in a silo. And indeed, you can't even say, well, we're really concerned about the orangutan, so we want all the rules about orangutans. That's our focal point. You can't save the orangutan without thinking about the communities that are impacted here, or the workers, the geopolitical situation. It all needs to be brought together in order to address this.
Oh, Michelle, it's very interesting that you mentioned, solutions. You mentioned the word solutions many times. Speaking about solutions, the palm oil. It is possible to have a sustainable palm oil. How we can like have a really sustainable palm oil?
Yes, it has been demonstrated that palm oil can be produced sustainably. About 19% of the global production of palm oil right now is certified as sustainable under the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. And again, that criterion, the principles and criteria that define that, which of course look at deforestation, biodiversity, human rights, labor rights, land grabbing, all of these kinds of issues. Very comprehensive, very detailed, and independently audited by third party certification bodies. So there's quite a lot of assurance that when it says it's sustainable, it will be sustainable. And if we find along the road that there's been some concern that there might have been non-compliance, there's a robust grievance process to deal with those issues within the RSPO. And we've seen results on the ground because in these areas that are better managed, we've seen biodiversity returning to these areas and moving through these plantations and fragmented landscapes. And some growers are working with the NGOs to create wildlife corridors and safe havens. We know of one company that has over 100 orangutans thriving within their concession area in forested areas, whereas outside the concession area, they're more at risk. So they're actually providing safe havens. So yeah, it is very possible to have sustainable palm oil, and for the most part, we define that by the principles and criteria of the RSPO, the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil.
That's amazing. I think probably you agree with me. Like it's like education and creating awareness is really really important to reach this kind of to work towards have more sustainable palm oil. Michelle, one of your favorite animals and creatures in the world is the orangutan, and
Yes.
also in the same time is related to palm oil because it's the most endangered species probably in many rainforests. Supporting sustainable palm oil practices is essential for orangutan survival. That is a fact. Is there any successful case that you would like to share with the audience that your nonprofit organization, Orangutan Land Trust, work with, for example, with different kind of corporates or buyers or global palm oil users and producers that are working to protect this particular species?
Well, I can probably talk about a few things. So, and then you can edit later if you like. One of the main things was a few years ago, we brought together a few of the largest producers of palm oil in the world with the NGOs concerned about biodiversity and scientists. We have a very formidable scientific advisory board that are at our disposal to bring data and fact and reason and strategy to the table. And we brought all these players to the table and we said, look, especially for the orangutan, we need to have a concentrated effort at making these, as I referred before, these fragmented landscapes have been fragmented historically, maybe over 30 or 50 or even 100 years by oil palm and other uses. But there are orangutans moving through these landscapes. They've been fragmented so much that their populations are no longer viable. They're not genetically viable because they can't, move across these areas far enough and meet with. How can we solve this? How can we return some biodiversity and some forest into these areas? And in the state of Sabah in East Malaysia, on the island of Borneo, there's a region called the Kinabatangan, and in this region there's lots of these fragmented islands of forests that contain orangutans. And we worked with local growers there, and we actually introduced onto aging oil palm, we put fig marcottes, so like these fig, kind of like grafting, so to speak, that the figs would grow up very, very quickly. They're a wonderful food source for orangutans and hornbills and all kinds of animals love it. And they are natural seed dispersers. So the forest would regenerate very quickly with this kind of skeletal framework of the fig tree and allow for the movement of these species. And that was really, really a successful project that we helped to initiate. We also know of really good brands that have pulled all the stops out to be as sustainable as possible. For example, Ferrero, the makers of Nutella, always come out top of the WWF palm oil buyer scorecard because not only are they sourcing exclusively sustainable palm oil, but they're working with communities on the ground and with smallholders and supporting biodiversity conservation initiatives on the ground. They're working, with education in Europe to educate children and consumers about what role they can play. So there's such potential for any point in the supply chain to really demonstrate not only best practice but really additive
Mhm.
value um, through their business practices.
No, certainly. Something that I'm learning lately is sustainability, biodiversity, environmental social governance, ESG, etc. It's not just local thing, it's we can see the impact it has around the world, right? But there is a term that is related to this, policymakers, global, geopolitics, etc. That is orangutan diplomacy. Can you explain? Is something that I learned is like they saying like the koala diplomacy from Australia, the panda diplomacy is worth it, is controversial. What is your opinion?
Yeah, it's sorry for laughing throughout your questioning there. We find such an idea quite nonsensical when it comes to orangutans. It may be appropriate for pandas that are born in a breeding center and are extremely endangered and can be lent out. I don't want to talk about panda diplomacy, but for orangutan diplomacy, it was uttered a few weeks ago by the Minister of Commodities in Malaysia at a biodiversity conference that, hey, we can send orangutans out to those countries who are buying our Malaysian palm oil because that will demonstrate to them that we're committed to orangutan conservation and to sustainability. All of us NGOs kind of went, what? Because Malaysia doesn't have any breeding programs for orangutans. All of their orangutans are either wild or they are rescued orangutans that are meant to be rehabilitated to go back into the wild. They are not zoo animals that can be traded overseas. And if the government was really serious about conservation and sustainability, one, they would engage that much more with NGOs and other stakeholders to actively protect the orangutans where they live in the Malaysian rainforest. But they would also ensure that 100% of Malaysian palm oil is not only adhering to their mandatory um, national standard, Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil or MSPO, but also the more robust and comprehensive standard of which is voluntary, of the RSPO. And those would be the two things that would really bring diplomacy to the discussion about, and also countries don't buy palm oil. Manufacturers and retailers buy palm oil, and they tend to be global. So I think it was just a kind of throwaway statement that got a lot of international attention. Perhaps the minister had the best intentions in stating this, but he was so quickly and totally rebuked by scientists and NGOs and even the ministers in Sarawak and Sabah saying, nonsense. No, you're not sending our orangutans out of the country.
NGOs like Orangutan Land Trust are there to to approach in different ways the this particular situation with, well, I mean with specific with orangutan. So speaking about holistic approach, etc., let's talk about Orangutan Land Trust, Michelle. What is the approach of your nonprofit? What is the main goal, and anything that you would like to share with the audience?
I guess we'd like to say that we're here to enable sustainable solutions for the long term survival of the orangutan in the wild. I used to be with an organization that was more about trying to raise funds to take care of rescued orphaned orangutans. So there's a lot of organizations that do great work in that field. But we kind of moved away from that because we saw this palm oil problem, and we thought, there are so many thousands of orangutans. I mean, you say thousands, they are critically endangered, but most of them are living outside of protected areas and are at grave risk from increased fragmentation due to oil palm, nickel, and other uses. And so we try to take a step back and understand the bigger picture and try to educate ourselves about the geopolitics and the shared responsibilities and the supply chains that might or might not have impact on what's happening on the ground, and find those, like I said, those sustainable solutions that will mean that orangutans are not being displaced or killed and needing to go to rescue centers, that we protect them and allow them to thrive where they're found. And that really is our approach. So I think holistic is the word that kind of sums up how we approach orangutan conservation. We're also very science backed or science based organization. Like I said, we've got this scientific advisory board made up of the best minds in this area, and they guide our strategy. And when we do get funding, we don't get a lot because we're more advocacy and engagement than going out having bingo nights to raise funds. Um, but when we do get funding, we tend to direct it to grassroots organizations working on the ground to address these impacts or work with these communities or develop these solutions um, on the ground. So we don't have our own team on the ground. We support grassroots organizations on the ground and enable them. We primarily work in Indonesia, so the local Indonesians and their communities, very much into community science and community conservation, to take the lead.
What is the reaction of the policymakers?
Policymakers in the producing countries. Um,
I don't know what is, because one of the approach of the Orangutan Land Trust is encourage policymakers. What is the reaction of them?
it's been a hard slog, as they say, especially in the producing countries of Indonesia, Malaysia, where orangutans live, because we've long been seen as an NGO, any NGO, but particularly an orangutan NGO, the the enemy of progress, and we're out to uh, take away the economic development of these countries by condemning palm oil. And we had to keep arguing, we're not condemning palm oil, we're encouraging you to do it sustainably. And it took a long time to build some trust and break down the preconceived notions of um, black and white and against and for, and understand the nuance. Every party needs to really accommodate or develop the ability to accommodate the nuance of such complex issues.
Certainly, the
And
complete
yeah, so
issues.
that's been it. And then we see in Europe that there's been impact in the development of the EUDR, the European Deforestation Regulation, whereby companies will now have to show, buyers in Europe will have to show that their commodities, including palm oil, are not associated with deforestation at the point of origin. And I would like to think that Orangutan Land Trust has played a small part in the discussions that have led to such widespread policies that will really impact not only oil palm and Indonesia, but soy in Brazil, for example.
Michelle, is there anything that you would like to add to this conversation before wrapping up?
Um, I guess I would like to say that everybody, whether you're a consumer or you're in the financial industry, financial institutions, or a producer or buyer, etc., everyone can, for my part, my interest, the orangutan, you can save orangutans every day by demanding and choosing only sustainable production and consumption of palm oil. And of course, that extends to so many other commodities, things you buy. The responsible consumption, responsible production. Palm oil has really led the way in demonstrating what that can look like. And we see soy and rubber and other commodity sectors now kind of embracing the same kind of concepts. And I think, that's the way forward in a highly consumptive world. And, we talk about reducing consumption, that's vital too. But the things that are consumed to be produced responsibly will lend those long-term sustainable solutions for biodiversity, for ecosystems and so forth. So we all play a part in that. And although the orangutan is a whole world away from Boston or Peru or the UK, we impact them every day and we can save them every day.
Michelle, where can people contact you?
Well, we've got a website. Our website is www.orangutanlandtrust, all one word, .com. And we're also on the usual social media channels. Just search for us, and or look on our website, and you can contact us there. Contact me through LinkedIn if you like. And I'd really welcome having these conversations with some of your listeners, and happy to answer questions on a one by one basis, or in a webinar or whatever. Like you said early on, we're very interested in education being a part of the solution. So I'm happy to participate in podcasts like these.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Really, I appreciate. I think like companies right now have much work to do in the relationship with biodiversity and specific with the palm oil, and of course to protect not only orangutan, all the species around that they involve in this kind of particular situation.
Of course, Ed.
Michelle, I would like to say thank you for your time.
Well, thank you so much for allowing me the time to say my piece.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I am Juan Carlos Giraldo from Boston, United States. Thank you so much, everyone. The views, information, or opinions expressed in this episode are my own and do not represent my employer's views.